And here we are. Didn't take long, did it? Now, give it a moment. I have to message Dr. Acid and make sure, see if he wants to continue on and join in. Turn that up a little bit more. And now it's tracking my microphone for the background, reacting to my voice. Isn't that just wonderful? Now can I turn that up? Beat sensitivity up to 5, so it just spazzes out as I'm talking. Oop, it's still going up. Hand up. Hand up. Beautiful. All right. Give it a moment. Let's see if Dr. Acid will be joining in. Let's see if he got that notification. That's another thing. Probably smart. Dr. Acid didn't even know I was live. The notifications have been being fucky with him. We did some Apex. I attempted a round of Dead by Daylight. The keyboard's getting worse, so I'm kind of not ready to try to get back into ties since it's a platformer and requires some somewhat precise movement, which it's not giving me. All right, so where we left off last night was hold on, let me rethink make sure I'm exactly right because otherwise I'll start spouting off in the middle of the book. Yeah. We left off with Jill just talking about the legalities and the rights of Valentine Michael Smith and pretty much covering how he is a rich one of like just fucking rich as hell, and technically by law owns Mars under human law. So I'll start off with the last sentence of the page before it. That seems like a good spot to start for that. Let me grab my coffee first. All right. I am so sorry it took so long. I got caught up in a very interesting conversation about police. I also ate dinner before attempting to jump into this, but that's another thing. We'll ignore that part. Ah, yes, alcohol. All right, who's ready for story time? Yes, at least I'm not hungry. I ate more leftovers. In fact, because I ate, let me go smoke some tobacco first before I start so I'm not reading for 10 minutes and jumping to that. In the meantime, something I should do before I start reading this time, because I didn't do this until more than halfway through last time. This is the book we're reading. We're starting off on page 22. Yeah, I forget to do that. I had a good bit of food. Hold up, hold up. Another thing that I can do real quick before. Ooh, tummy. Is this one is for you, Dr. Acid. Hold up, because it doesn't charge me. Now I'm gonna smoke my tobacco real quick and then we'll get started. All right, here we are. It is time. We are ready. Did it post that link for me? I think it got drowned out by Vessa's request, didn't it? This is the book. One more time. Oh, you are keeping that queue full. Yes, I got coffee, but this coffee has alcohol. Make it a little easier to read the book longer. I gotta let you try some. If only you're like too far away, Vessa. You're an entire state away. Okay, starting off from the last sentence of the last page. You know what happened? General Atomics, a Swiss corporation, American controlled, claimed the moon. The Federation couldn't just brush them off, and that would have been too raw. And anyhow, the Russians wouldn't have held still, so the High Court ruled that a corporate person, a mere legal fiction, could not own a planet. Therefore, the real owners were the flesh and blood men who had maintained the occupation, Larkin and Associates. So they recognized them as a sovereign nation and took them into the Federation with some melon slicing for those on the inside and fat concessions to General Atomics and its daughter corporation, Lunar Enterprises. This did not entirely suit anybody, and the Federation High Court was not all-powerful in those days. But it was a compromise everybody could swallow. It resulted in some tight rules for colonizing planets, all based on the Larkin decision and intended to avoid bloodshed. It worked, too. It's a matter of history. The World War III did not result from conflict over space travel and such. So now, the Larkin decision is solidly a part of our planetary law and applies to Smith. Jill shook her head. I don't see the connection. Martians. Think, Jill, by our laws, Smith is a sovereign nation in himself and the sole owner of the planet Mars. And now this is where we left off. Let me take a sip of my alcohol. All right. Jill looked round-eyed. I've certainly had too many martinis, Ben. I would swear that you said that the patient owns the planet Mars. He does. He maintained occupation of it unassisted for the required length of time. Smith is the planet, Mars king, president, sole civic body. What you will. If the skipper of the Champion had not left colonists behind, Smith's tenure might have failed. But he did. And that continues occupation, even though Smith came to Earth. But Smith doesn't have to split with them. They are mere immigrants until he grants them Martian citizenship. Fantastic. It surely is. Also, it's legal. Honey, do you now see why so many people are interested in who Smith is and where he came from, and why? The administration is so damn anxious to keep him under a rug. What they're doing isn't even vaguely legal. Smith is also a citizen of the United States and of the Federation. By derivation, dual citizenship with no conflict. It's illegal to hold a citizen, even a convicted criminal, incommunicado, anywhere in the Federation. That's one of the things we settled in World War III, but I doubt if Smith knows his rights. Also, it has been considered an unfriendly act all throughout history to lock up a visiting friendly monarch, which is what he is, and not to let him see people, especially the press, meaning me. You still won't sneak me in as a thumb-fingered electrician. Huh? You've got me worse scared than ever, Ben. If they had caught me this morning, what do you think they would have done to me? Nothing rough. Just locked you in a padded cell with a certificate signed by 3 doctors and allowed you mail in alternate leap years. They aren't mad at you. I'm wondering what they are going to do to him. What can they do? Well, he might just happen to die from G fatigue, say. That would be a fine out for the administration. You mean murder him? Tut tut. Don't use nasty words. I don't think they will. In the first place, he is a mine of information. Even the public has some dim notion of that. He might be worth more than Newton, and Edison and Einstein, and six more like them, all rolled into one. Or he may not be. I don't think they would dare touch him until they were sure. In the second place, at the very least, he is a bridge, an ambassador, a unique interpreter between the human race and the only other civilized race we have as yet encountered. This is certainly important, but there is no way to guess just how important. Ooh. How are you on the classics? Ever read H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds? A long time ago in school. Consider the idea that the Martians might decide to make war on us, and win. They might, you know, and we have no way of guessing how big a club they can swing. Our boy Smith might be the go-between, the peacemaker, who could make the first interplanetary war unnecessary. Even if this possibility is remote, the administration cannot afford to ignore it until they know. The discovery of intelligent life on Mars is something that, politically, they haven't figured out yet. Then you think he is safe? Probably, for the time being. The Secretary General has to guess, and guess right. As you know, his administration is shaky. I don't pay any attention to politics. You should. It's only barely less important than your own heartbeat. I don't pay any attention to that either. Don't talk when I'm orating. The majority headed by the United States could slip apart. Overnight, Pakistan would bolt at a nervous cough, in which case there would be a vote of no. Hold up, I gotta. My stomach is fighting me because I just ate a bunch of food. No confidence. A general election, and Mr. Secretary General Douglas would be out and back to being a cheap lawyer again. The man from Mars can make or break him. Are you going to sneak me in? I am not. I am going to enter a nunnery. Is there more coffee? I'll see. They both stood up. Jill stretched and said, "Oh, my ancient bones. And oh, and Lordy, look at the time. Never mind the coffee, Ben. I've got a hard day tomorrow. Being polite to nasty patients and standing clear of interns. Run me home, will you? Or send me home. I guess that's safer. Call a cab. That's a lamb." Okay, though, the evening is young. He went into his room and came out carrying an object about the size and shape of a small cigarette lighter. Sure you won't sneak me in? Gee, Ben, I want to, but... Never mind. I wouldn't let you. It really is dangerous, and not just to your career. I was just softening you up for this. He showed her the little object. Will you put a bug on him? Huh? What is it? The greatest boon to divorce lawyers and spies since the Mickey Finn. A micro-miniaturized wire recorder. The wire is spring-driven so that it can't be spotted by a snooper circuit. The insides are transistors and resistors and capacitors and stuff, all packed into plastic. You could drop it out of a cab and not hurt it. The power is about as much radioactivity as you would find in a watch dial, but shielded. The wire is good for 24 hours, then you slide out a spool and stick in another one. The spring is part of the spool, already round. Will it explode? She asked nervously. You could bake it in a cake. But Ben, you've got me scared to go back into his room now. Unnecessary. You can go into the room next door, can't you? I suppose so. This thing has donkey's ears. Fasten the concave side flat against the wall. Surgical tape will do nicely, and it picks up every word spoken in the room beyond. Is there a closet or something? She thought about it. I'm bound to be noticed if I duck in and out of that adjoining room too much. It's really part of the suite he's in. Or they might start using it. Look, Ben, his room has a third wall, in common with a room on another corridor. Will that do? Perfect. Then you'll do it? Give it to me. I'll think it over and see how the land lies. Jackson stopped to polish it with his handkerchief. Put on your gloves. Why? Possession of it is slightly illegal. Good for a short vacation behind bars. Always use gloves on it and spare tools, and don't get caught with it. You think of the nicest things. Want to back out? Jill let out a long breath. No, I've always wanted a life of crime. Will you teach me gangster lingo? I want to be a credit to you. Good girl. A light blinked over the door. He glanced up. That must be your cab. I rang for it when I went to get this. Oh, find my shoes, will you? No, don't come up to the roof. The less I'm seen with you from here on, the better. As you wish. As he straightened up from putting on her shoes on, he took his head in both hands and kissed him. She took his head in both hands and kissed him. Dear Ben, no good can come of this, and I hadn't realized you were a criminal type, but you're a good cook as long as I set up the combination, and I just might marry you if I can trap you into proposing again. The offer remains open. Do gangsters marry their moles, or is it frails? We'll see. She left hurriedly. Jill Boardman placed the bug without difficulty. The patient in the adjacent room in the next corridor was bedfast. Jill often stopped to gossip. She stuck it against the wall over a closet shelf while chattering about how the maids just never dusted high in the closets. Removing the spool the next day and inserting a fresh one was just as easy. The patient was asleep. She woke while Jill was still perched on a chair and seemed surprised. Jill diverted her with a spicy and imaginary ward rumor. Jill sent the exposed wire by mail, using the hospital's post office, as the impersonal blindness of the postal system seemed safer than a cloak-and-dagger ruse. But her attempt to insert a third fresh spool she muffed. She had waited for a time when the patient was asleep, but had just mounted the chair when the patient woke up. "Oh, hello, Miss Boardman." Jill froze, and with one hand on the wire recorder, "Hello, Miss Verchilli." She managed to answer. "Have a nice nap?" "Fair," the woman answered peevishly. "My back aches." "I'll rub it." "Doesn't help much. Why are you always fiddling around in my closet? Is something wrong?" Jill tried to re-swallow her stomach. The woman wasn't really suspicious, she told herself. "Mice," she said vaguely. "Mice? Oh, I can't abide mice. I'll have to have another room right away." Jill tore the little instrument off the closet wall and stuffed it into her pocket, jumped down from the chair and spoke to the patient. Now, Miss Verchilli. I was just looking to see if there were any mouse holes in that closet. There aren't. You're sure?" "Quite sure. Now let's rub that back, shall we?" "Easy over." Jill decided she could not plant the bug in that room again, and concluded that she would risk attempting to place it in the empty room, which was part of K-12, the suite of the man from Mars, but it was almost time for her relief before she was free again. She got the pass key, only to find she did not need it. The door was unlocked and held 2 more Marines. The guard had been doubled. One of them glanced up as she opened the door. "Looking for someone?" "No. Don't sit in the bed, boy," she said crisply. "If you need more chairs, we'll send for them." She kept her eye on the guard while he reluctantly got up and she left, trying to conceal her trembling. The bug was still burning a hole in her pocket when she went off duty. She decided to return it to Caxton at once. She changed clothes, shifted it to her bag, and went to the roof. Once in the air, she headed toward Ben's apartment. She began to breathe easier. She phoned him in flight. "Caxton speaking. Jill." "Ben, I want to see you. Are you alone?" He answered slowly. "I don't think it's smart, kid. Not now." "Ben, I've got to see you. I'm on my way over." "Well, okay, if that's how it's got to be." Such enthusiasm. "Now look, hun, it isn't that Bye." She switched off, calmed down, and decided not to take it out on poor Ben. Fact was, they were both playing out of their league, and at least she should have stuck it to nursing and left politics alone. At least she was. I'm moving a little fast. Hold up. I want to get to page 65 so we can meet Jubal. It's not going to happen tonight. It's probably going to take another 2 or 3 nights, but we'll see. She felt better when she saw Ben, and better yet when she kissed him and snuggled into his arms. Ben was such a dear. Maybe she really should marry him. But when she tried to speak, he put a hand over her mouth and whispered close against her ear, "Don't talk. No names and nothing but trivialities. I may be wired by now." She nodded, and he led her into the living room. Without speaking, she got out the wire recorder and handed it to him. His eyebrows went up when he saw that she was returning not just a spool, but the whole works. But he made no comment. Instead, he handed her a copy of the Afternoon Post. "Seen the paper?" he said in a natural voice. "You might like to glance at it while I wash up." "Thanks." As she took it, he pointed to a column. He then left, taking with him the recorder. Jill saw that the column was Ben's own syndicated outlet. "The Crow's Nest" by Ben Caxton. Everyone knows that jails and hospitals have one thing in common. They both can be very hard to get out of. In some ways, a prisoner is less cut off than a patient. A prisoner can send for his lawyer, can demand a fair witness. He can invoke the habeas corpus and require the jailer to show cause in open court. But it takes only a simple no visitors sign ordered by one of the medicine men of our peculiar tribe to consign a hospital patient to oblivion more thoroughly than ever was the man in the iron mask. To be sure, the patient's next of kin cannot be kept out by this device, but the man from Mars seems to have no next of kin. The crew of the ill-fated envoy had few ties on Earth. If the man in the iron mask, the man from Mars, has any relative who is guarding his interests, a few thousand inquisitive reporters, such as your present scrivener, have been unable to verify it. Who speaks for the man from Mars? Who ordered an armed guard placed around him? What is his dread disease that no one may catch a glimpse of him, nor ask him a question? I address you, Mr. Secretary General. The explanation about physical weakness and G fatigue won't wash. If that were the answer, a 90-pound nurse would do as well as an armed guard. Could this disease be financial in nature? Or let's say it softly. Is it political? There was more. All in the same vein, Jill could see that Ben was deliberately baiting the administration, trying to force them to bring Smith out into the open. What that would accomplish, she did not know. Her own horizon not encompassing high politics and high finance. She felt, rather than knew, that Caxton was taking serious risk in challenging the established authorities. But she had no notion of the size of the danger, nor of what form it might take. She thumbed through the rest of the paper. It was well loaded with follow-up stories on the Martian cities. There was very little about Smith, merely a medical bulletin that he was improving slowly but satisfactorily from the effects of his trip. Ben came out and dropped some sheets of onion skin in her lap. Here's another newspaper you might like to see, he remarked and left again. Jill soon saw that the other newspaper was a transcription of what her first wire had picked up. As typed out is marked first voice, second voice, and so on. But Ben had gone back and written in names wherever he had been able to make attributions later. He had written across the top, all voices identified or not are masculine. Most of the items were of no interest. They simply showed that Smith had been fed or washed or massaged, and that each morning and afternoon he had been required to get up and exercise under the supervision of a voice identified as Dr. Nelson, and a second voice marked Second Doctor. Jill decided that this must be Dr. Thaddeus. But one longish passage had nothing to do with the physical care of the patient. Jill read it, and reread it. Dr. Nelson, how are you feeling, Roy? Are you strong enough to talk for a while? Smith, yes. Dr. Nelson, a man wants to talk to you. Smith, pause. Who? Caxton had written in all of Smith's speeches are preceded by long pauses, some longer than others. Nelson, this man is our great, untranscribable guttural word Martian. Dash Martian, because it was in Martian. He is our oldest pauses, our oldest old one. Will you talk with him? Smith, very long pause. I am great happy. The old one will talk, and I will listen and grow. Nelson, no, he wants to ask you questions. Smith, I cannot teach an old one. Nelson, the old one wishes it. Will you let him ask you questions? Smith, yes. Background noises, short delay. Nelson, this way, sir. I have Dr. Muhammad standing by, ready to translate for you. Jill read new voice. Caxton had scratched this out and had written in Secretary General Douglas Silt. Secretary General, I won't need him. You say Smith understands English? Nelson, well, yes and no, Your Excellency. He knows quite a number of words, but as Muhammad says, he doesn't have any cultural context to hang the words on. It can be rather confusing. Secretary General, oh, we'll get along all right, I'm sure. When I was a youngster, I hitchhiked all through Brazil without knowing a word of Portuguese when I started. Now, if you will just introduce us, then leave us alone. Nelson, sir, I think I had better stay with my patient. Secretary General, really, Doctor, I'm afraid I must insist. Sorry. Nelson, I am afraid that I must insist. Sorry, sir. Medical ethics. Secretary General, interrupting, as a lawyer, I know a little something about medical jurisprudence. So don't give me that medical ethics mumbo-jumbo, really. Did this patient select you? Nelson, not exactly, but Secretary General, just as I thought. Has he had any opportunity to make a choice of physicians? I doubt it. His present status is that of a ward of the state. I am acting as his next of kin, de facto, and you will find, de jure, as well. I wish to interview him alone. Nelson, long pause, then very stiffly. If you put it that way, Your Excellency, I withdraw from the case. Secretary General, don't take it that way, Doctor. I didn't mean to get your back hair up. I'm not questioning your treatment, but you wouldn't try to keep a mother from seeing her son alone, now would you? Are you afraid that I might hurt him? Nelson, no, but Secretary General, then what is your objection? Come now, introduce us and let's get on with it. The fussing may be upsetting your patient. Nelson, Your Excellency, I will introduce you, then you must select another doctor for your ward. Nelson, step over here, sir. Son, this is the man who wants to see you. Our great old one. Smith, untranscribable. Secretary General, what did he say? Nelson, sort of a respectful greeting. Muhammad says it translates to, I am only an egg. More or less that, anyway. He used to use it on me. It's friendly. Son, talk, man talk. Smith, yes. And you had better use simple one-syllable words if I may offer a last advice. Secretary General, oh, I will. Nelson, good. Goodbye, Your Excellency. Goodbye, son. Secretary General, thanks, Doctor. See you later. Secretary General continued, how do you feel? Smith, feel fine. Secretary General, good. Anything you want, just ask for it. We want you to be happy. Now I have something I want you to do for me. Can you write? Smith, write? What is write? Secretary General, well, your thumbprint will do. I want to read a paper to you. This paper has a lot of lawyer talk, but stated simply it says that you agree that in leaving Mars you have abandoned, given up any claims that you have there. Understand me? You assigned them in trust to the government. Smith, no answer. Secretary General, well, let's put it this way. You don't own Mars, do you? Smith, longish pause. I do not understand. Secretary General, let's try this way. You want to stay here, don't you? Smith, I do not know. I was sent by the old ones. Long, untranscribable speech sounds like a bullfrog fighting a cat. Secretary General, damn it, they should have taught him more English by now. See here, son, you don't have to worry about these things. Just let me have your thumbprint here at the bottom of this page. Let me have your right hand. No, don't twist around that way. Hold still, I'm not going to hurt you. Doctor Nelson. Second doctor, yes, sir. Get Dr. Nelson. Dr. Nelson, but he has left, sir. He said that you took him off the case. Secretary General, Nelson said that? Damn him. Well, do something. Give him artificial respiration. Give him a shot. Don't just stand there. Can't you see the man is dying? Second doctor, I don't believe there's anything to be done, sir. Just let him alone until he comes out of it. That's what Dr. Nelson always did. Secretary General, blast Dr. Nelson. The Secretary General's voice did not appear again, nor that of Dr. Nelson. Jill could guess from the gossip she had picked up around the hospital that Smith had gone into one of his cataleptic withdrawals. There were only 2 more entries, neither of them attributed. One read, no need to whisper, he can't hear you. The other read, take that tray away. We'll feed him when he comes out of it. Jill was giving the transcription a third reading when Ben reappeared. He was carrying more onion skin sheets, but he did not offer them to her. Instead, he said, hungry? She glanced inquiringly at the papers in his hand, but answered, starved. Let's get out of here and shoot a cow. He said nothing more while they went to the roof and took a taxi. And he still kept quiet during a flight to the Alexandria platform, where they switched to another cab. Ben selected one with a Baltimore serial number. Once in the air, set it for Hagerstown, Maryland, then settled back and relaxed. Now we can talk. Ben, why all the mystery? Sorry, Prettyfoots. Probably just nerves and my bad conscience. I don't know that there is a bug in my apartment, but if I can do it to them, they can do it to me. Let me breathe a bit. Just a moment. Like I've said, Heinlein's writing is very, very detailed. He had the mind of a lawyer. A great author, but his level of description is just otherworldly. He covers everything. All the way down to the legal logistics of what he's trying to cover. Sorry, Prettyfoots. Probably just nerves and my bad conscience. I don't know that there is a bug in my apartment, but if I can do it to them, they can do it to me. And I've been showing an unhealthy interest in things the administration wants to keep doggo. Likewise, while it isn't likely that a cab signaled from my flat would have a recorder hidden in the cushions, still it might have. The special service squads are thorough, but this cab, he patted his seat cushions. They can't gimmick thousands of cabs. One picked at random should be safe. Jill shivered. Ben, you don't really think they would? She let it trail off. Don't I now? You saw my column. I filed that copy 9 hours ago. Do you think the administration will let me kick it in the stomach without doing something about it? But you have always opposed this administration. That's okay. The duty of His Majesty's loyal opposition is to oppose. They expect that, but this is different. I have practically accused them of holding a political prisoner. One the public is very much interested in. Jill, a government is a living organism. Like every living thing, its prime characteristic is a blind, unreasoned instinct to survive. You hit it, it will fight back. This time, I've really hit it. He gave her a sidelong look. I shouldn't have involved you in this. I love that analogy. I really do. Like, that's just such a beautiful analogy for government. I mean, you hit it, and it'll fight back. And this time, he really hit it. He did, though. Before I continue, because this is, I don't know if you're following along with the beginning of this next page. We've already covered, I believe, 6 pages. Any questions? Anything come up that you want me to go over again? Because like I've said before, I can. I can just go it off memory. Gives me a chance to take a sip of my drink, too. So, try to think of a question if you have it. Think of something and try to think of some of the stuff that came up that would be more deserving of an explanation. Here's one that I haven't covered. It's going to come up in a bit, but without... They've referenced fair witness a few times so far in the book. In this book, a fair witness is somebody who's trained for, I want to say it's like 6 years or so. But a fair witness is basically somebody who is trained to be entirely impartial as a witness. Oop, I've been pokeballed. So a fair witness would... It's a good way to put it. This is what's going to come up with Jubal Harshaw in about 50 pages. So, a fair witness, say you point at a barn, and you ask, what color is that barn? Say it's painted white. The fair witness will only say, the side facing me is white, because they cannot account for the sides that they cannot see. So, a fair witness is, by all legal means, as credible as a video or a photograph. That's another thing that's come up that could be covered real quick while I take a few sips of my drink. Oh yeah. Yes, the government did pretty much just try to con Valentine Michael Smith out of his rights to owning Mars. By human standards. He wouldn't recognize that himself anyways, but that's not the point. Alright, here we go, getting back into it. Where was I? He gave her a sidelong look. I shouldn't have involved you in this. Me? I'm not afraid, at least not since I turned that gadget back over to you. You're associated with me. If things get rough, that could be enough. Jill shut up. She'd never in her life experienced the giant ruthlessness of a giant power outside of her knowledge of nursing, and of the joyous guerrilla warfare between the sexes. Jill was almost as innocent as the man from Mars. The notion that she, Jill Boardman, would have never experienced anything worse than a spanking as a child and an occasional harsh word as an adult, could be in physical danger, was almost impossible for her to believe. As a nurse, she had seen the consequences of ruthlessness, violence, brutality. But it could not happen to her. Their cab was circling for a landing in Hagerstown before she broke the moody silence. Ben, suppose this patient does die, what happens, huh? He frowned. That's a good question. A very good question. I'm glad you asked it. Shows that you are taking an interest in the work. Now, if there are no other questions, the class is dismissed. Don't try to be funny. Jill. I've been awake nights when I should have been dreaming about you, trying to answer that one. It's a two-part question, political and financial, and here are the best answers I have now. If Smith dies, his odd legal claim to the planet Mars vanishes. Probably the pioneer group the champion left behind on Mars starts a new claim, and almost certainly the administration worked out a deal with them before they left Earth. The champion is a Federation ship, but is more than possible that the deal, if there was one, leaves all the strings in the hands of that redoubtable defender of human rights. Mr. Secretary General Douglas, such a deal could keep him in power for a long time. On the other hand, it might mean nothing at all. Huh? Why? The Larkin decision might not apply. Luna was uninhabited, but Mars is inhabited by Martians. At the moment, Martians are a legal zero, but the High Court might take a look at the political situation, stare at its collective navel, and decide that human occupancy meant nothing on a planet already inhabited by non-human natives. Then rights on Mars, if any, would have to be secured from the Martians themselves. But Ben, that would logically be the case anyhow. This notion of a single man owning a planet, it's fantastic. Don't use that word to a lawyer. He won't understand you. Straining at gnats and swallowing camels is a required course in all law schools. Besides, there is a case in point. In the 15th century, the Pope deeded the entire Western Hemisphere to Spain and Portugal, and nobody paid the slightest attention to the fact that the real estate was already occupied by several million Indians of their own laws, customs, and notions of property rights. His grant deed was pretty effective, too. Take a look at a Western Hemisphere map and notice where Spanish is spoken and where Portuguese is spoken, and see how much land the Native Americans have left. I have to retranslate in that. So if I'm not paying attention, I'll say, outdated book. Yes, but Ben, this is the 15th century. It is to a lawyer. They still cite Blackwell, Code Napoleon, or even the laws of Justinian. Mark it down, Jill. If the High Court rules the Larkin decision applies, Smith is in a position to grant or withhold concessions on Mars, which may be worth millions, or more likely billions. If he assigns his claim to the present administration, then Secretary Douglas is the man who will hand out the plums, which is just what Douglas is trying to rig. You saw that bug transcript. Ben, why should anybody want that sort of power? Why does a moth fly toward a light? The drive for power is even less logical than the sex urge and stronger. But I said this was a two-part question. Smith's financial holdings are almost as important as his special position as nominal King Emperor of Mars. Possibly more important. For a High Court decision could knock out his squatter's rights on Mars, but I doubt if anything could shake his ownership of the Lyle Drive and a major chunk of lunar enterprises. The 8 wills are a matter of public record, and in the 3 most important cases he inherits with or without a will, what happens if he dies? I don't know. 1,000 alleged cousins would pop up, of course, but the Science Foundation has fought off such money-hungry vermin in the past 20 years. It seems possible that if Smith dies without making a will, his enormous fortune will revert to the state. The state? Do you mean the Federation of the United States? Another very good question to which I do not know the answer. His natural parents come from 2 different member countries of the Federation, and he was born outside all of them. And is going to make a crucial difference to some people who votes those blocks of stock and who licenses those patents. It won't be Smith. He won't know a stock proxy from a traffic ticket. It is likely to be whoever can grab him and hang on to him. In the meantime, I doubt if Lloyd would write a policy on his life. He strikes me as a very poor risk. The poor baby. The poor, poor infant. Okay, now we've reached the end of that chat. Let me post one more time for anybody coming in, or I'm not paying attention to viewers or anything right now. I don't know who all is here. I only know what Stream Avatar says, and Stream Avatars only tells me followers. So, this is the book. If you want to follow along, we are now on page... Let me switch back to it here. Page 30. Just reached page 30. 35 more pages and we'll be entering the home of Jubal Hershaw. We're gonna make it there tonight. Fuck it, I'll get us there. I'll keep going. I've already knocked out 8 pages since we're on page 30. I think we can make it. The restaurant in Hagerstown had atmosphere, as well as good food, which meant that it had tables in the boughs of 3 enormous old trees. Overall was a force-field roof which kept the outdoors dining area perpetually summer even in rain and snow. Ooh, stomach. It is not happy that I'm doing all this reading after eating. Jill wanted to eat up in the trees, but Ben ignored her and bribed the maître d'hôtel to set up a table near the water in a spot of his choice, then ordered a portable stereo tank placed by their table. Jill was miffed. Ben, why bother to come here and pay these prices if we can't eat in the trees and have to endure that horrible jitterbox? Patience, little one. The tables up in the trees all have microphone circuits. They have to have them for service. This table is not gimmicked, I hope, as I saw the waiter take it from a stack of unused ones. As for the tank, not only is it un-American and probably subversive to eat without watching a stereo, but also the racket from it would interfere even with the directional mic aimed at us. Now page 31. From a distance, assuming that Mr. Douglas's investigators are beginning to take an interest in us, which I misdoubt they are, do you really think they would be shadowing us, Ben? Jill shivered. I don't think I'm cut out for a life of crime. Pish. Likewise, Tush. When I was working on the General Synthetics bribery scandals, I never slept twice in the same place and ate nothing but packaged food I had bought myself. After a while, you get to like it. Stimulates the metabolism. My metabolism doesn't need it, thank you. All I require is one elderly, wealthy, private patient. Not going to marry me, Jill? After my future husband kicks off, yes. Or maybe I'll be so rich I can afford to keep you as a pet. Best offer I've had in months. How about starting tonight? After he kicks off. During their cocktails, the musical show, plus lavish commercials which had been banging their eardrums from the stereo tank, suddenly stopped. An announcer's head and shoulders filled their eardrums from the stereo tank, suddenly stopped. I went back up a line. Hold up. An announcer's head and shoulders filled the tank. He smiled sincerely and said, NW, New World Networks, and its sponsor of the hour. Wise Girl Methusian Lozenges is honored and privileged to surrender the next few minutes. Nani? What are you saying what to? What do I need to go back over? Oh no. Oh no. You want me to pull it up and take it off twice? Let me see, I believe I can do that. There you go. I removed the last 2 of them, so you only got one version of that song on the queue. Where were we? Oh, this is a pretty key part of this. Understandable. If you're actually listening to what I'm saying, this book takes quite a bit of brain cells to keep up with sometimes. You're not going to really understand most of what's going on the first 3 times you go through this book. It takes a while to really grok. I'm not going to explain grok yet. The book will explain grok when it's time to explain grok. If I do it now, I'll just kind of fuck something in there. Not that it's hard to explain, it's just that grokking in and of itself is an entire process that is just best experienced the proper way. All right. Remember, friends, every wise girl uses wise girls. Easy to carry, pleasant to take. Guaranteed, no fail, and approved for sale without prescription under Public Law 1312. Why take a chance on old-fashioned, unesthetic, harmful, on-sheer methods? Why risk losing his love and respect? Remember, the lovely lupine announcer glanced aside and hurried through the rest of his commercial. I give you the wise girl who in turn brings you the Secretary General and the man from Mars. The 3D picture dissolved into that of a young woman, so sensuous, so unbelievably mammalian, so seductive as to make every male who saw her unsatisfied with local talent. She stretched and wiggled and said in a bedroom voice, I always use wise girl. The picture dissolved, and a full orchestra played the opening bars of Hail to the Sovereign Peace. Ben said, do you use wise girl? None of your business. She looked ruffled and added, It's a quack nostrum, anyhow. What makes you think I need it? Caxton did not answer. The tank had filled with fatherly features of Mr. Secretary, General Douglas. Friends, he began, fellow citizens of the Federation, I have tonight a unique honor and privilege. Since the triumphant return of our trailblazing ship champion, he continued in a few thousand well-chosen words to congratulate the citizens of Earth on their successful contact with another planet, another civilized race. He managed to imply that the exploit of the champion was the personal accomplishment of every citizen of the Federation, and that any one of them could have led the expedition had he not been busy with other serious work, and that he, Secretary Douglas, had been chosen by them as their humble instrument to work their will. The flattering notions were never stated baldly, but implied, the underlying assumption being that the common man was the equal of anyone and better than most, and that good old Joe Douglas embodied the common man. Even his mussed cravat and his cowlicked hair had a just folks quality. And Bert Caxton wondered who had written the speech. Jim Sanforth, probably. Jim had the most subtle touch of any member of Douglas's staff in selecting the proper loaded adjective to tickle and soothe an audience. He had written advertising commercials before he went into politics and had absolutely no compunctions. Yes, that bit about the hand that rocks the cradle was clearly Jim's work. We're moving on to page 32 now. Jim was the sort of jerk who would entice a young girl with candy and consider it a smart operation. Turn it off, Jill said urgently. Huh? Shut up, Prettyfoots. I've got to hear this. And so, friends, I have the honor to bring you now our fellow citizen, Valentine Michael Smith, the man from Mars. Mike, we all know you are tired and have not been well, but will you say a few words to your friends? They all want to see you. Now, I want you to keep in mind how Smith talks and his ability to function as a human being for this, because this, yeah. The stereo scene in the tank dissolved to a semi-close-up of a man in a wheelchair. Hovering over him like a favorite uncle was Douglas, and on the other side of the chair was a nurse, stiff, starched, and photogenic. Jill gasped. Ben whispered fiercely, Keep quiet. I don't want to miss a word of this. The interview was not long. The smooth baby face of the man in the chair broke into a shy smile. He looked at the cameras and said, Hello, folks. Excuse me for sitting down. I'm still weak. He seemed to speak with difficulty, and once the nurse interrupted to take his pulse. In answer to questions from Douglas, he paid compliments to Captain Van Tromp and the crew of the Champion. Thanked everyone for his rescue and said that everyone on Mars was terribly excited over contact with Earth, and that he hoped to help in welding a strong and friendly relations between the two planets. The nurse interrupted again, but Douglas said gently, Mike, do you feel strong enough for just one more question? Sure, Mr. Douglas, if I can answer it. Mike, what do you think of the girls here on Earth? Gee. The baby face looked awestruck and ecstatic and turned pink. The scene dissolved again to the head and shoulders of the Secretary General. Mike asked me to tell you, he went on in fatherly tones, that he will be back to see you as soon as he can. He has to build up his muscles, you know. The gravity of Earth is as rough on him as the gravity of Jupiter would be to us. Possibly next week if the doctors say he is strong enough. The scene shifted back to the exponents of a wise girl lozenges, and a quick one-act playlet made clear that a girl who did not use them was not only out of her mind, but undoubtedly a syntho in the hay as well. Men would cross the street to avoid her. Ben switched to another channel, then turned to Jill and said moodily, "Well, I can tear up tomorrow's column and look around for a new subject to plug. They not only made my today's squawk look silly, but it appears that Douglas has him safely under his thumb. Ben, huh? That's not the man from Mars. What, baby, are you sure?" "Sure, I'm sure. Oh, it looked like him. It looked a great deal like him. Even the voice was similar. But it was not the patient I saw in the guarded room." Ben tried to shake her conviction. He pointed out that several dozen other persons were known to have seen Smith. Guards, interns, male nurses, the captain, and crew members of the Champion. Probably others. Quite a few of that list must have seen this newscast, or at least the administration would have to assume that some of them would see it and spot the substitution. If there had been a substitution, it did not make sense to great a risk. Jill did not offer a logical rebuttal. She simply stuck out her lower lip and insisted that the person on the stereo was not the patient she had met. Finally, she said angrily, all right. Have it your own way. I can't prove I'm right, so I must be wrong. Men." "Now, Jill, please take me home." Ben silently went for a cab. He did not accept one from outside the restaurant, even though he no longer thought that anyone would be taking interest in his movements. He selected one from the landing flat of a hotel across the way. Jill remained chilly on the flight back. Presently, Ben got out the transcripts of the sounds picked up from Smith's hospital room and reread them. He read them still again and thought for a while and said, "Jill, yes, Mr. Caxton." "I'll mister you. Look, Jill, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was wrong." "And what leads you to this momentous conclusion?" He slapped the folded papers against his palm. "This Smith could not possibly have been showing this behavior yesterday and the day before, and then given that interview tonight. He would have flipped his controls. Gone into one of those trance things. I am gratified that you have finally seen the obvious." "Jill, will you kindly kick me in the face a couple of times, then let up? This is serious. Do you not know what this means?" "It means they use an actor to fake an interview. I told you that an hour ago." "Sure, an actor and a good one. Carefully typed and coached, but it implies much more than that. As I see it, there are two possibilities. The first is that Smith is dead, and dead." Jill suddenly was back in the curious water-drinking ceremony and felt that strange, warm, unworldly flavor of Smith's personality. Felt it with unbearable sorrow. Maybe, in which case this ringer will be allowed to stay all for a few weeks to 10 days until they have time to drop whatever papers they want him to sign. And the ringer will die, and they will ship him out of town, probably with a hypnotic injunction not to talk so strong that he would choke up with asthma if he tried to spill it. Or maybe even a transorbital lobotomy if the boys are playing for keeps. Oh, but if Smith is dead, we can just forget it. We'll never be able to prove the truth, so let's assume that he is still alive. Oh, I do hope so. What is a Cuba to you? Or you to Cuba? Caxton misquoted. "If he is still alive, it could be that there is nothing especially sinister about it. After all, a lot of public figures use doubles for some of their appearances. It does not even annoy the public, because every time a yokel thinks that he has spotted a double, it makes him feel smart and in the know. So it may be that the administration has just yielded to public demand and given them that look at the man from Mars we have all been yapping for. It could be that in 2 or 3 weeks our friend Smith will be in shape or stand the strain of public appearances, at which time they will trot him out, but I doubt it like hell." "Why?" "Use your pretty curly head. The Honorable Joe Douglas has already made one attempt to squeeze out of Smith what he wants, and failed miserably. But Douglas can't afford to fail. So I think he will bury Smith deeper than ever, and that is the last we will ever see of the true man from Mars." "Kill him?" Jill said slowly. "Why be rough about it? Lock him in a private nursing home and never let him learn anything. He may already have been removed from Bethesda Center. Oh dear, Ben, what are we going to do?" Okay, so, we are now on page 34. I'm going to step out for a quick smoke break. While I'm doing that, please come up with anything that you have about the book, because I can answer it. I am way too confident in my ability to answer pretty much anything on this. I'm probably not way too confident because of how many times I've been over this and the fact that this is quite literally my favorite book of all time. And here we are. We're back. Give my stomach a second. Let me go ahead and repost the link. This is the book that we are reading. For anybody who wants to follow along, we are on page 34 now. Take another sip of my drink. Caxton scowled and thought, I don't have a good plan. They own both the bat and the ball and are making the rules. But what I am going to do is this. I'm going to walk into that hospital with a fair witness on one side and a tough lawyer on the other and demand to see Smith. Maybe I can force them to drag it out into the open. I'll be right behind you. Like mischief, you will. You added more music to the cue there, Vessa? Keeping that cue full. Like mischief, you will. You stay out of this. As you pointed out, it would ruin you professionally. But you need me to identify him. Not so. I flatter myself that I can tell a man who was raised by non-humans from an actor pretending to be such. A man in the course of a very short interview. But if anything goes wrong, you are my ace in the hole, a person who knows that they are pulling a hanky-panky concerning the man from Mars. And who has access to the inside of the Bethesda Center. Honey, if you don't hear from me, you are on your own. Ben, why would they hurt you? Or, Ben, they wouldn't hurt you. Sorry, I'm tripping up over my words again. I gotta get back into the groove. Hold up. Ben, they wouldn't hurt you. I'm fighting out of my weight, youngster. There is no telling. Uh-oh, Ben. I don't like this. Look, if you do get in to see him, what are you going to do? I'm going to ask him if he wants to leave the hospital. If he says he does, I'm going to invite him to come along with me, in the presence of a fair witness. They won't dare stop him. A hospital isn't a prison. They don't have any legal right to hold him. All right. Add the Dragon Maid song. Which one is it? The rap one that I played earlier. Uh-oh, Ben, I don't like the look of this. If you do get in to see him, what are you going to do? I'm going to ask him if he wants to leave the hospital. If he says he does, I'm going to invite him to come along with me in the presence of a fair witness. They won't dare stop him. A hospital isn't a prison. They don't have any legal right to hold him. Then what? He really does need medical attention, Ben. He's not able to take care of himself. I know. Caxton scowled again. I've been thinking of that. I can't nurse him. You could, of course, if you had the facilities. We could put him in my flat. And I could nurse him. We'll do it, Ben. Slow down. I thought of that. Douglas would pull some legal rabbit out of his hat. A deputation of force would call, and Smith would go right back to Pokey, and so would both of us. He wrinkled his brow. But I know one man who could give him shelter and possibly get away with it. Here's the first reference of good old Jubal Hershaw. Ever heard of Jubal Hershaw? Huh? Who hasn't? That's one of the advantages. Everybody knows who he is. It makes him hard to shove around. Being both a doctor of medicine and a lawyer, he is 3 times as hard to shove around. But most importantly, he is so rugged and individualist that he would fight the whole Federation, Department of Security, with just a potato knife if it suited his fancy, and that makes him 8 times as hard to shove around. But the point is that I got well acquainted with him during the dissatisfaction trials. He is a friend I can count on in a pinch. If I can get Smith out of Bethesda, I'll take him to Harshaw's place over in the Poconos, and then just let those jerks try to hide him under a rug again. Between my column and Harshaw's love for a fight, we'll give him a bad time. I absolutely fucking love Jubal Hershaw. Like, he is just, his whole personality is fucking phenomenal. We still have another 30 pages before we get to his doorstep. And I am excited to get there, because I love it so much. Every single piece of him is just so perfect. Why is my aspect ratio all fucky right now? I'm afraid to open OBS and see what's going on. I'll do that later. Despite a late evening, Jill was ready to relieve the night floor nurse 10 minutes early the next morning. She intended to obey Ben's orders to stay out of his proposed attempt to see the man from Mars. But she was determined to be close by when it happened, just in case Ben might need reinforcements. There were no longer Marine guards in the corridor. Trays, medications, and 2 patients to be prepared for surgery kept her busy. The first 2 hours, she had only time to check the knob of the door to suite K-12. It was locked, as was the door to the adjoining sitting room. The door to the watchroom on its other side was closed. She considered sneaking in again to see Smith through the connected sitting room, now that the guards were gone, but decided to postpone it. She was too busy. Nevertheless, she managed to keep a close check on everyone who came onto her floor. Ben did not show up, and discreet questions asked of her assistant on the switchboard reassured her that neither Ben nor anyone else had gone in to see the man from Mars, while Jill was busy elsewhere. It puzzled her. While Ben had not set a time, she had the impression that he had intended to storm the Citadel as early in the day as possible. Presently, she felt that she had just had to snoop a bit. During a lull, she knocked at the door of the suite's watchroom and then stuck her head in and in pretended surprise, "Oh, good morning, doctor. I thought Dr. Frame was in here." The physician at the watch desk was strange to Jill. He turned away from the displayed physio data, looked at her, then smiled as he looked at her up and down. "I haven't seen Dr. Frame, nurse. I'm Dr. Brush. Can I help?" At the typical male reaction, Jill relaxed. "Nothing special. To tell the truth, I was curious. How is the man from Mars?" She smiled and winked. "It's no secret to the staff, doctor. Your patient," she gestured at the inner door. "Huh?" He looked startled. "Did they have him in the suite?" "What? Isn't he here now?" "Not by 6 decimal places. Miss Rose Bankerson, Dr. Garner's patient. We brought her in early this morning." "Really? But what happened to the man from Mars? Where did they put him?" "I haven't the faintest say. Did I really just miss seeing Valentine Smith?" "He was here yesterday, that's all I know." "And Dr. Frame was on this case?" "Some people have all the luck. Look what I'm stuck with. He switched on the peeping Tom above his desk. Jill saw, framed in it, as if she were looking down, a waterbed. Floating in it was a tiny old woman. She seemed to be asleep. "What's her trouble?" Nurse, if she didn't have more money than any person ought to have, you might be tempted to call it senile dementia. As it is, she is in for a rest and a checkup." Jill made small talk for a few moments more, then pretended to see a call light. She went back to her desk, dug out the night log. Yes, there it was. V.M. Smith, K-12, transfer. Below that entry was another. Rose Bankerson, Miss Red, K-12, diet kitchen instructed by Dr. Garner. No orders. I'm not reading these abbreviations. Fur NT responsible. Having noted that the rich old gal was responsibility of hers, Jill turned her mind back to Valentine Smith. Something about Miss Bankerson's case struck her as odd, but she could not put her finger on it, so she put it out of her mind, and thought that the matter that did interest her. Why had they moved Smith in the middle of the night? To avoid any possible contact with outsiders, probably. But where had they taken him? Ordinarily, she would simply have called reception and asked. But Ben's opinions, plus the phony broadcast of the night before, had made her jumpy about showing curiosity. She decided to wait until lunch and see what she could pick up on the gossip grapevine. But first, Jill went to the floor's public booth and called Ben. His office informed her that Mr. Caxton had just left town, to be gone a few days. She was startled, almost speechless by this, then pulled herself together and left word for Ben to call her. She then called his home. He was not there. She recorded the same message. Ben Caxton had wasted no time in preparing his attempt to force his way into the presence of Valentine Michael Smith. He was lucky in being able to retain James Oliver Cavendish as his fair witness. While any fair witness would do, the prestige of Cavendish was such that a lawyer was hardly necessary. The old gentleman had testified many times before the High Court of the Federation, and it was said that the wills locked up in his head represented not billions but trillions. Cavendish had received his training in total recall from the great Dr. Samuel Renshaw himself, and his professional hypnotic instruction had been undergone as a fellow of the Rhine Foundation. His fee for a day, or fraction thereof, was more than Ben made in a week. But Ben expected to charge it off to the Post Syndicate in any case. The best was none too good for this job. Caxton picked up the junior Frisbee of Biddle, Frisbee, Biddle, and Reed, as that law firm represented the Post Syndicate, and the two younger men called for witness Cavendish. The long, spare form of Mr. Cavendish, wrapped chin to ankle in the white cloak of his profession, reminded Ben of the Statue of Liberty, and was almost conspicuous. Ben had already explained to Mark Fernsby that he intended to try, and Frisbee had already pointed out to him that he had no status and no rights. Before they called for Cavendish, once in the fair witness's presence, they conformed to protocol, and did not discuss what he might be expected to see and hear. The cab dropped them on top of the Bethesda Center. They went down to the director's office. Ben handed in his card and said that he wanted to see the director. An imperious female with richly cultivated accent asked if he had an appointment. Ben admitted that he had none. Then I'm afraid that your chance of seeing Dr. Bromer is very slight. Will you state your business? Just tell him, Caxton said loudly, so that others waiting would hear, that Caxton of the Crow's Nest is here with a lawyer and a fair witness to interview Valentine Michael Smith, the man from Mars. Throw in some pokeballs at me there, Vessa. Keeping me on my toes. She was startled, almost out of her professional hauteur, but she recovered and said frostily, I shall inform him. Will you be seated, please? Thanks. I'll wait right here. They waited. Frisbee broke out a cigar. Cavendish waited with the calm patience of one who has seen all manner of good and evil and now counts them both the same. Caxton uttered and tried to keep from biting his nails. At least the Snow Queen behind the desk announced, Mr. Berquist will see you. Berquist? Gil Berquist? I believe his name is Mr. Gilbert Berquist. Caxton thought about it. Gil Berquist was one of Secretary Douglas's large squad of stooges, or executive assistants. He specialized in chaperoning official visitors. I don't want to see Berquist. I want the director. But Berquist was already coming out, hand shoved out before him, greeter's grin plastered on his face. Benny Caxton, how are you, chum? Long time, and so forth, still peddling the same old line of hoke? He glanced at the fair witness, but his expression admitted nothing. Ben shook hands briefly. Same old hoax, sure, but what are you doing here, Gil? If I ever manage to get out of public service... I'm sorry, I love this song. Alright, where was I? If I ever manage to get out of public service, I'm going to get me a column, too. Nothing to do but phone in 1,000 words of rumors each day and spend the rest of the day in debauchery. I envy you, Ben. I said, what are you doing here, Gil? I want to see the director. Then get 5 minutes with the man from Mars. I did not come here for your high-level brush-off. Now, Ben, don't take that attitude. I'm here because Dr. Bromer has been driven almost crazy by the press, so the Secretary General sent me over to take some of the load off of his shoulders. Okay, I want to see Smith. Ben, old boy, don't you realize that every reporter, special correspondent, feature writer, commentator, freelance, and sob sister wants the same thing? You Winchills are just one squad in an army. If we let you all have your way, you would kill off the poor jerk in 24 hours. Polly Peepers was here not 20 minutes ago. She wanted to interview him on love life among the Martians. Berquist threw up both hands and looked helpless. I want to see Smith. Do I see him or don't I? No, actually, no. To be fair, the love life among the Martians would be an insane interview because the Martians don't really do that. The Martians actually have... This is going to be covered later on, but I'm going to go ahead and just cover this now because this is such an interesting concept that I love about this book. So, while the Martians do have a male and female gender, it's split by life cycle. They're born female, so they're as a young age they are female, and then as they grow up they turn male. So Martians in all reality are both male and female at different points of their life. And I love it. Okay, where was I? I want to see Smith. Do I see him or don't I? Ben, let's find a quiet place where we can talk over a long, tall glass. You can ask me anything you want to. I don't want to ask you anything. I want to see Smith. By the way, this is my attorney, Mark Frisbee Biddle and Frisbee. As was customary, Biddon did not introduce the fair witness. They all pretended that he was not present. I've met Frisbee, Berquist acknowledged. How's your father, Mark? Sinuses still giving him fits? About the same. This foul Washington climate. Well, come along, Ben. You too, Mark. Hold it, said Caxton. I don't want to interview you, Gil. I want to see Valentine Michael Smith. I'm here as a member of the press, directly representing the Post Syndicate and indirectly representing over 200 million readers. Do I see him? If I don't, say so out loud and state your legal authority for refusing me. Berquist sighed. Mark, will you tell this keyhole historian that he can't go busting into a sick man's bedroom just because he has a syndicated column? Valentine Smith made one public appearance just last night, against his physician's advice, I might add. The man is entitled to peace and quiet and a chance to build up his strength and get oriented. That appearance last night was enough, more than enough. There are rumors, Caxton said carefully, that the appearance last night was a fake. Berquist stopped smiling. Frisbee, he said coldly. Do you want to advise your client on the law concerning slander? Take it easy, Ben. I know the law on slander, Gil. In my business, I have to. But whom am I slandering? The man from Mars or somebody else? Name a name, I repeat. He went on, raising his voice. That I have heard that the man interviewed on TV last night was not the man from Mars. I want to see him myself, and ask him. It is very big brain. The crowded reception hall was very quiet as everyone present bent an ear to the argument. Berquist glanced quickly at the fair witness, and got his expression under control, and said smilingly to Caxton, Ben, it's just not possible that you talked yourself into the interview you wanted as well as a lawsuit. Wait a moment. He disappeared into the inner office, came back fairly soon. I arranged it, he said warily. Though God knows why. You don't deserve it, Ben. Come along. Just you, Mark. I'm sorry, but we can't have a crowd of people. After all, Smith is a sick man. No, said Caxton. Huh? All three of us or none of us. Take your choice. Ben, don't be silly. You're receiving a very special privilege. Tell you what, Mark can come along and wait outside the door. But you certainly don't need him. Berquist glanced toward Cavendish. The witness seemed not to hear. Maybe not, but I've paid his fee to have him along. My column will state tonight that the administration refused to permit a fair witness to see the man from Mars. Berquist shrugged. Come along then, Ben. I hope that slander suit really clobbers you. They took the patient's elevator, rather than the bounce tube, out of deference to Cavendish's age. Then rode a slide away for a long distance past laboratories, therapy rooms, solaria, and ward after ward. They were stopped once by a guard who phoned ahead, and then let them through. They were at last ushered into a physio-data displayed room used for watching critically ill patients. This is Dr. Tanner, Berquist announced. Doctor, this is Mr. Caxton and Mr. Frisbee. He did not, of course, introduce Cavendish. I really love the entire concept of fair witnesses. Like, I wish that was a true legal trade. Like, oop, the fuck did I just knock off? Hold up. No, it's the little thingy thing. Okay. I'll fix that later. Yeah, I love the entire concept of a fair witness. It's like, it's almost like a notary, in a way, but very different. Okay, where was I? Tanner looked worried. Gentlemen, I am doing this against my better judgment because the director insists. I must warn you of one thing. Don't do or say anything that might excite my patient. He is extremely neurotic condition and falls very easily into a state of pathological withdrawal, a trance, if you choose to call it that. Epilepsy? Asked Ben. A layman might easily mistake it for that. It is more like catalepsy, but don't quote me. There is no clinical precedent for this case. Are you a specialist? Doctor? Psychiatry, maybe? Tanner glanced at Berquist. Yes, he admitted. Where did you do your advanced work? Berquist said. Look, Ben, let's see the patient and get it over with. You can quiz Dr. Tanner afterwards. Okay. Tanner glanced over at his dials and graphs, then flipped a switch and stared into a peeping Tom. He left the desk, unlocked a door, and led them into an adjoining bedroom, putting a finger to his lips as he did so. The other four followed him in. Caxton felt as if he were being taken to view the remains, and suppressed a nervous need to laugh. The room was quite gloomy. We keep it semi-darkened because his eyes are not accustomed to our light levels, Tanner explained in a hushed voice. He turned to a hydraulic bed, which filled the center of the room. Mike, I've brought some friends to see you. Caxton pressed closer, floating therein, half concealed by the way his body sank into the plastic skin covering the liquid in the tank, and farther concealed by a sheet up to his armpits was a young man. He looked back at them, but said nothing. His smooth, round face was expressionless. Moving on to page 39 now. So far as Ben could tell, this was the man who had been on stereo the night before. He had a sudden sick feeling that little Jill, with the best of intentions, had tossed him a live grenade, a slander suit that might very well bankrupt him. You are Valentine Michael Smith? Yet? The man from Mars? Yet? You were on stereo last night. The man in the tank did not answer, Tanner said. I don't think he knows the word yet. Let me try. Mike, you remember what you did with Mr. Douglas last night? The face looked petulant. Bright lights hurt. Yes, the lights hurt your eyes, Mr. Douglas. Had you say hello to people. The patient smiled slightly. Long ride in chair. Okay, agreed Caxton. I catch on. Mike, are they treating you all right here? Yes. You don't have to stay here, you know. Can you walk? Yes. You don't have... Tanner said hastily. Now, see here, Mr. Caxton. Berquist put a hand on his arm and shut up. I can walk. A little tired. I'll see that you have a wheelchair, Mike. If you don't want to stay here, I'll help you get out of bed and take you anywhere you want to go. Tanner shook off Berquist's hand and said, I can't have you interfering with my patient. He's a free man, isn't he? Caxton persisted, or is he a prisoner here? Berquist answered, Of course he is a free man. Keep quiet. Doctor, let the fool dig his own grave. Thanks, Gil. Thanks all to pieces. So he is free to leave if he wants to. You heard what he said, Mike. You don't have to stay here. You can go anywhere you like. I'll help you. The patient glanced fearfully at Tanner. No. Okay. Tanner snapped. Mr. Berquist, this has gone on quite far enough. My patient will be upset the rest of the day. All right, Doctor. Ben, let's get the show on the road. You've had enough, surely. Just one more question. Caxton thought hard, trying to think what he could squeeze out of it. Apparently Jill had been wrong, yet she had not been wrong, or so it had seemed last night. But something did not quite fit, although he could not tell what it was. One more question, Berquist begrudged. Thanks. Mike, last night, Mr. Douglas asked you some questions. The patient watched him, made no comment. Let's see. He asked you what you thought of the girls here on Earth, didn't he? The patient's face broke into a big smile. Gee. Yes, Mike. When and where did you see these girls? The smile vanished. The patient glanced at Tanner, then he stiffened. His eyes rolled up, and he drew himself into the fetal position, knees drawn up, head bent, and arms folded across his chest. Tanner snapped, Get them out of here. He moved quickly to the tank bed and felt the patient's wrist. Berquist sighed savagely. That tears it, Caxton. Will you get out? Or shall I call the guards and have you thrown out? Oh, we're getting out, all right, Caxton agreed. All but Tanner left the room, and Berquist closed the door. Just one point, Gil, Caxton insisted. You've got him boxed up in here, so just where did he see those girls? Don't be silly. He's seen lots of girls, nurses, laboratory technicians, you know. But I don't know. I understand he had nothing but male nurses and that female visitors had been rigidly excluded. Don't be any more preposterous than you have to be. Berquist looked annoyed, then suddenly grinned. You saw a nurse with him on stereo just last night. Oh, so I did. Caxton shut up and let himself be let out. They did not discuss it further until the three were in the air, headed for Cavendish's home. Then Frisbee remarked, Ben, I don't suppose the Secretary-General would demean himself to sue you, since you did not print it. Still, if you really do have a source for that rumor you mentioned, we had better perpetuate the evidence. You don't have much of a leg to stand on, you know. Forget it, Mark. He won't sue. Ben glowered at the floor of the cab. How do we know that was the man from Mars? Come off it, Ben. How do we know? We saw a man about the right age in a hospital bed. We have Berquist's word for it, and Berquist got his start in politics issuing denials. His word means nothing. We saw a total stranger, supposed to be a psychiatrist, and when I tried to find out where he had studied psychiatry, I got irked out. How do we know, Mr. Cavendish? Did you see or hear anything that convinced you that this bloke was the man from Mars? Cavendish answered carefully. It is not my function to form opinions. I see, I hear. That is all. Sorry. By the way, are you through with me in my professional capacity, huh? Oh, sure. Thanks, Mr. Cavendish. Thank you, sir. It was an interesting assignment. The old gentleman took off the cloak and set him apart from the ordinary mortals. Folded it carefully and laid it on the seat. He sighed, relaxed, and his features lost professional detachment. Warmed and mellowed, he took out cigars, offered them to the others. Frisbee took one, and they shared a light. I do not smoke, Cavendish remarked, through a thick cloud. While on duty, it interferes with optimum functioning of the senses. If I had been able to bring along a crew member of the Champion, Caxton persisted, I could have tied it down. But I thought surely I could tell. I must admit, remarked Cavendish, that I was a little surprised at one thing you did not do, huh? What did I miss? Calluses. Calluses? Surely, a man's life history can be told from his calluses. I once did a monograph on them, published in the Witness Quarterly, like Sherlock Holmes' famous monograph on tobacco ash. This young man from Mars, since he has never worn our sort of shoes and has lived in gravity about one-third of ours, should display foot calluses consonant with his former environment. Even the time he recently spent in space. Oh, thank you for giving Fred a treat. Fred deserves it. Fred is the goodest boy. Where was I? Calluses. Even the time he recently spent in space should have left their traces. Very interesting. Gam, good Lord, Mr. Cavendish, why didn't you suggest it to me, sir? The old man drew himself up and his nostrils dilated. It would not have been ethical. I am a fair witness, not a participant. My professional association would suspend me for much less. Surely you know that. Sorry, I forget myself, Caxton frowned. Let's wheel this buggy around and go back. We'll take a look at his feet, or I'll bust the place down with Berquist's fat head. I'm afraid you'll have to find another witness in view of my indiscretion in discussing it, even after the fact. Yes, there's that, Caxton frowned. Better just calm down, Van advised Frisbee. You're in deep enough now. Personally, I'm convinced it was the man from Mars. Occam's razor. Least hypothesis. Just plain horse sense. Caxton dropped him, then set the cab to cruise while he thought. Presently, he punched the combination to take him back to Bethesda Medical Center. He was less than halfway to the center when he realized that this trip was useless. What would happen? He would get as far as Berquist, no further. He had been allowed in once with a lawyer with a fair witness to demand to be allowed to see the man from Mars. A second time, all in one morning, was unreasonable and would be refused. Nor, since it was unreasonable, could he make anything effective out of it in his column. He had not been acquired a widely syndicated column through being balked. He intended to get in. How? Well, at least he now knew where the putative man from Mars was being kept. Get in as an electrician? Or as a janitor? Too obvious. He would never get past the guard, not even as far as Dr. Tanner. Was Tanner actually a doctor? It seemed unlikely. Medical men, even the worst of them, tended to shy away from hanky-panky contrary to their professional code. Take that ship's surgeon. Nelson, he had quit, washed his hands of the case simply because, wait a minute, Dr. Nelson was one man who could tell offhand whether that young fellow was the man from Mars without checking calluses, using trick questions, or anything. Caxton reached for buttons, ordered his cab to ascend to parking level and hover, and immediately tried to phone Dr. Nelson, relaying through his office for the purpose. Since he neither knew where Dr. Nelson was, nor had with him the means to find out. Nor did his assistant, Osbert Kilgallen, know where he was. But he did have at hand resources to find out. It was not even necessary to draw on Caxton's large account of uncollected favors in the Enclave. As the Post Syndicate's file and important persons placed him at once in the New Mayflower. A few minutes later, Caxton was talking with him. To no purpose. Dr. Nelson had not seen the broadcast. Yes, he had heard about it. No, he had no reason to think the broadcast had been faked. Did Dr. Nelson know that an attempt had been made to coerce Valentine Smith into surrendering his rights? Oop, I just hit the wrong button. Let me get back to where we were. It changed pages on me. Good chance for me to catch a breath and take a sip of my drink anyways. So far, any questions or anything to cover? Anything I can answer. Yes. What is thy questions? How? How what? We're almost to Jubal Hershaw. Very close. How? When? Where? Some very good questions, though. Smacking me with Pokeballs. No purpose. Dr. Nelson had not seen the broad. I'm going to start off from here because it's just the easier spot. To no purpose. Dr. Nelson had not seen the broadcast. Yes, he had heard about it. No, he had no reason to think the broadcast had been faked. Did Dr. Nelson know that an attempt had been made to coerce Valentine Smith into surrendering his rights to Mars under the Larkin decision? No, he did not know it, had no reason to believe so. I would not be interested if it were true. It was preposterous to talk about anyone owning Mars. Mars belonged to the Martians. So, let's propose a hypothetical question. Doctor, if someone were trying to, but Dr. Nelson had switched off, when Caxton tried to reconnect, a recorded voice stated sweetly, the subscriber has voluntarily suspended service temporarily. If you care to record, Caxton switched off. Caxton made a foolish statement concerning Dr. Nelson's parentage. But what he did next was much more foolish. He phoned the Executive Palace, demanded to speak to the Secretary General. His action was much more a reflex than a plan. In his years as a snooper, first as a reporter, then as a litman, he had learned that close-held secrets could often be cracked by going all the way up to the top and there by making himself unbearably unpleasant. He knew that such twisting of the tiger's tail was dangerous, for he understood the psychopathology of great power as thoroughly as Jill Boardman lacked knowledge of it. But he had habitually relied on his relatively safety as a dealer in still another sort of power, almost universally feared and appeased by the powerful. What he forgot was that in phoning the palace from a taxicab, he was not doing so publicly. Jackson was not put through to the Secretary General, nor had he expected to be. Instead, he spoke with half a dozen underlings and became more aggressive with each one. He was so busy that he did not notice it when his cab ceased to hover and left the parking level. When he did notice it, it was too late. The cab refused to obey the orders he at once punched into it. Caxton realized bitterly that he had let himself be trapped by means no professional hoodlum would fall for. His call had been traced, his cab identified, his idiot robot pilot placed under orders of an overriding police frequency, and the cab itself was being used to arrest him and fetch him in, all most privately and with no fuss. He wished keenly that he had kept Fair Witness Cavendish with him, but he wasted no time on his futility, but cleared the useless call from the radio and tried at once to call his lawyer Mark Frisbee. He was still trying when the taxicab landed inside a courtyard, landing Fiat, and his signal was cut off by its walls. He then tried to leave the cab, found that the door would not open, and was hardly surprised to discover that he was becoming very lightheaded and was fast losing consciousness. Yeah. Ben just got himself kind of fucked there. That's a thing that just happened. Where's my drink? Hold up. We are almost to Jubal Hershaw. I gotta plug my phone in so I can still see the chat. Even though I can technically see it on the screen, I don't know why I'm insisting on having my phone right there. In fact, let me go ahead and just not use my phone for this. Makes it a little easier. I'm catching my breath now. So yeah, Ben basically went and just poked the bear. He did a big dumb. Thank you for the head pats, Vessa. Quick, I'm gonna go ahead and catch my breath and take some more sips of my coffee. Very useful. Quite perfect. Let me go ahead and post. This is the book we're reading. We are currently on page, double check here, page 42. We have a good 20 pages left. I actually know exactly what's going to happen in between here and Jubal. And, understandably, what's going to happen between here and Jubal is the inevitable escape of Valentine Michael Smith, or more breakout. But what more is going to happen is it's going to be the first reference to some of the powers that Smith has. Because like I said last night, being raised Martian, he's got some comprehension of the Martian abilities.